Hello, friends. I am Shelly Clough, and today we are kicking off 12 days of Christmas cards with this cute card right here. I am super excited about this series. I know you guys love the tag series so much. Check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But we are going to be doing one Christmas card a day for the next 12 days. So to get started, I just have a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper. I just use this scoring board here. So it's paper trimmer with a little scoring tool on it. So I will score the paper and then trim it down to be 5 by 7. You can also pre-purchase cards, but the cost ends up, I think, a little less when you trim down the paper. And so I already had the tool. So I went ahead and did it that way. But I'll link any options below that you can use. For this card, I'm going to tape down a couple of corners. And I'm taping the corners because we're going to have that bow crisscrossing through the center. And so I want to leave my edges kind of free in the center there. So for a brush today, I'm going to grab my size 6 Aqua Elite brush, and I am going to start with my bow. To wake up my paints, I'm just going to give my palette a spray with my mister bottle. This just kind of helps wake all the paints up, makes it a little easier for me to get the pigment out of there. This palette, the swatch card, and all the paints I use in here is linked below as well. So I'm just going to use a combination. This has been my favorite, Christmas red. It's just a combo of alizarin crimson and cadmium red. And I'm just going to mix up a good sized puddle of that. And I want it to be pretty pigmented so that we have a nice bold bow here. So you can see I'm just adding lots of pigment to that puddle and then a little bit of water here and there. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then before I touch the page, I'm just going to sort of pat down my brush a couple of times to make sure I don't have any excess water drops on there. And then to start, I'm just going to sort of eyeball the center of my page, kind of about right there. And I'm going to start with the loops on my bow. So I'm going to come and just make a little looping motion here. And then once I've got the initial shape, I'm going to make a portion of it a little bit wider so that it gives it a little bit of dimension. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. We're just going to bring our loop out here, and they don't have to be symmetrical. It just makes it look more kind of organic and cute if it's not perfectly symmetrical. So don't worry about that. I just widen that part of it, and I'm just dropping a little extra pigment here, kind of smoothing that. So you see how some pigment was kind of collecting here. I'm just using my brush to sort of smooth that out. And then I'm just letting those connect in the middle there, like a little infinity symbol. And then I'm going to make my tails coming down. So I'm going to start thin and then sort of come down this way and make like the middle of that a little bit wider with a nice little point at the end. And then on the other side here, same thing. Make it a little wider in the middle and just drop some extra pigment in there. Look how cute that is. Okay, now that I've got that center bow down, I can do my lines going up and down. So the thing I like about this is that I don't like to make these lines perfectly straight because it just gives it a little bit of character, I think. It makes it look kind of more homemade and delicate. So I'm not worried about making these lines perfectly straight. So I don't need like a ruler or anything. I like having a little bend or wiggle in there, and I'm just widening them up so that they all look consistent. And then when I go behind the bow, I'm just making sure not to touch my brush on this portion right here. I'm just going to go right up to it and then over on this side. And that just makes it look like the bow is sitting on top. You just want to have it match on both sides there. Okay, and then I've got one last side here. I'm just going to come over this way. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now I'm going to let this dry completely, and then I will come back and add my pine needles onto this. Okay, so now that this is totally dry, I actually added a little tape to these two corners as well. They were starting to curl up a little bit, so I just taped those corners down, and now we're ready to add our pine needles. So I'm going to come here and mix up some Viridian green with some burnt umber. This has been my favorite kind of pine needle green. And what that does is it just makes a nice earthy tone. If you just use Viridian without enough burnt umber, it's a really turquoisey green that's overly saturated. But when you add that brown in, it makes it kind of this lovely shade. And then I'm also going to make just a little puddle of brown right here because I want to work a little brown in here and there as I do these pine needles. And I'm still using this Aqua Elite brush, the size 6. It should help me make those pine needles nice and small. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of brown, and I'm going to make one of my pine needles kind of coming up this way. I start with just a thin little line in the middle and then start adding in green. I do these little light flicks. I'm just sort of barely dancing my brush above the paper. You can see that. And I just want those needles to go in a variety of directions. So I don't want them all facing out at the same angle. And here and there, I'll tap a little extra color on that middle stem. And then just be careful as you get kind of in here. We want this to look like it is behind the bow. So you can go over this middle one, but back here, maybe just add a couple little flicks kind of down like that. So it looks like it's back behind there. I'm going to get a little more brown on my brush and do a few flicks in this brown color. Whenever you can add a second color to something, it makes it look a little more dynamic. I'm going to go back in the green and just deepen up this lower portion here. A couple of flicks, and then I am going to, again, tap a little extra in the middle, a couple more flicks on top, and then I'm going to do one going out over to this side. So kind of same thing, a little stem coming through, just using super light pressure on my brush. Almost, you can see I wiggle my brush above the page for a minute until I get close enough where it's just barely flicking. It's kind of how I do that. And this is where it is super helpful to have a brush with a really nice point on it. So in I did a Christmas card video, and we used this Perla Escoda brush that has a super nice point on it. And that one works really well. I just don't always like switching brushes mid-process. So we're just going to stick with this one and make it work. But if you're having a hard time making these tiny little flicks, you can try a couple things. You can just switch to a smaller size of brush. So just get one that has like the smallest little, for example, this is a size 2 by Silver Black Velvet. And it's got a super tiny tip on it. So that could be a great option if you're having trouble making these tiny little flicks. So again, just sort of trying to alternate some of the direction, purposely letting some of those crisscross with each other. Helps it look a little more organic. Just doing those little flicks and then kind of coming out behind the bow here, a little bit down there so that it all looks like it's behind. How pretty would it be to actually get a gift wrapped like this with some evergreens on it? Okay, so there are my pine needles. So now that I'm all done with the painting, I'm just going to peel off the tape and we are done. So a little trick with peeling off the tape, you want to peel it off at a 45-degree angle. It helps it not to rip the page when you kind of pull it off at an angle like that. And so I'm just going to do that on all 4 sides. Okay, so this is our finished card. I'm going to add one more little detail that I like to do on some of my creations that I make. I had this custom stamp made a few years back, and I like to use it on the back of cards and bookmarks that I make. So I'm just going to press that on my stamp pad here. It just says handmade by Shelley Clough Art. Has my website on there. So that's a fun little touch. I'll link below where I got it from if you want. There is my little stamp. So that can be a fun way. If you want, you can add that on the back. But here is our day 1 of watercolor Christmas cards. I hope you had fun with this design. I'm so excited to go through another 12 days with you. It's been so fun hearing about you guys painting your own projects, and I can't wait to paint some more. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you are not yet. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.